Greetings to everybody who has joined the meeting so far. I need to let you know that I am recording this so that it could be available to students who can't make this noontime meeting, and will be posted on our website. So as you're joining, welcome, welcome. I note that Tom Virgin is out there, who also is represented in the wonderful exhibition of prints currently at the Ritter Gallery. A shout out to Tom Virgin. I hope you get over to see his work as well. What I'm going to do right now is to share some credits that need to be given for the exhibition, and then a short movie of Kim Spivey's, and then I'll introduce her and then she'll take it away. So welcome again. I'm so happy to see so many people here, and I just want to make sure everything's working right, and it looks like it is. So let me move to my PowerPoint. So this event is sponsored by Department of Visual Arts and Art History, our college and university galleries. There's 2 exhibitions currently up at FAU, and I hope that you get to visit both of them. Well worth the effort. And I might say a study just came out that said that going to art shows at museums and galleries is safer than going to a restaurant. So, and I have to say, Rod Folds has done everything to keep the facilities safe. So you can feel assured in visiting these spaces, but please wear a mask. Practice social distancing. Both exhibitions were collaboratively organized and installed by recent FAU grads and students. And you can see their names here. One of them is in my morning and afternoon class, so shout out to Daniela. Okay. University galleries and staff and student employees worked on this. I have to say Ashley Utley was the backbone of it for me. She kept me in order, so I was thankful to her assistance. And then down at the bottom, not only do they install and present an exhibition, but they also do the outreach and provide educational programming. So great appreciation to Rod Folds and his staff for all that they do. The university galleries and its programming cannot happen without the support of many people, as listed here. You're also invited to help out in the future when you're a famous artist or whatever it is that happens in your life. You can contribute back to us. That'd be awesome. And particularly, they have a museum education programs, and that's made possible by the K-Arts Integration Endowment. So really a big thanks to Rod Folds for facilitating this exhibition as well. He's well known for his beautiful exhibition designs and layouts. So he runs a tight ship when the stuff gets installed, and we're really pleased with the result. And also for supporting the idea. The idea came, in all truth, I was working with Kim Spivey on a set of prints, and I realized I knew nothing about printmaking. And here I am, a visual artist, and I wanted to learn more about printmaking. And I reached out to Rod to have this exhibition at the same time I was working with Kim Spivey. And this all evolved because then he reached out to Joseph Velasquez, who's our professor of printmaking, who has also worked on curating these exhibitions. And you'll learn more about that later. So on March 12th, there will be another talk, this time with Ingrid Schindal from IS Projects down in Fort Lauderdale. We have selected for our talks Kim Spivey because she is our past grad and we're so proud. As well as Ingrid Schindal, who is really quite close, and Sammy McLean, who many of you might know from an MFA here at FAU, works with her as well. So we're really proud to feature people we have really direct connections with from FAU. If you have any questions in this, I think the easiest thing to happen is if you would write them or type them into the chat box. And at the end, after Kim gives her presentation, I will read her the questions and she will answer them. So now I'm going to share with you the video.
Welcome to Ground Printmaking. I am Kim Spivey, and I want to share with you my artist-run press. I am an artist with a BFA degree in printmaking and an MFA degree in painting. Ground Printmaking was started in 2017 as a place where artists could explore the medium of printmaking with a focus on a greener approach to etching. Special consideration is given to the materials used to ensure a healthy and safe environment to work in, as historically many toxic substances have been used in the creation of making prints. When coming to printmaking from another medium, an artist enters a space that allows for a different pathway to create, that perhaps might bring up something new in the way that they approach their work going forward. There is a magical component when a print is pulled off the press for the first time. Within etching alone, there are so many factors that can affect the outcome of the print. And to explore these, many tests are made to visualize the range of possibilities. A big part of ground printmaking is education and sharing the processes of safer printmaking. In demonstrations, observers are walked through the entire etching process and walk away with an understanding of what an original print is and the processes behind making one. In a screen-dominant world, there is something to experiencing an original print in person and taking in all the subtleties and micro typographies from the ink and pressure. I have opened my artist-run press to South Florida artists and community members who want to explore their creativity in a new medium. I delight in working with a wide range of people with a broad range of goals. I always learn something new in each encounter and have decided that outreach and education through safer printmaking practices is the mission of my artist-run press. Inspired by these exchanges, I find my own work is revitalized and that it provides for a sustainable practice. Ground Printmaking is located in Palm Beach Gardens, and you can visit my website, www.kimspivey.com, for more information.
Well, it gives me really great pleasure right now to introduce Kim Spivey. I've worked with her as a graduate student and then more currently on a suite of prints and ongoing projects because working with her stimulated very much my mind. It really made me flow with creativity having that exchange with her. So let me say this, that she got her BFA in printmaking in 2007 and she got her MFA in painting in 2011 from FAU. So proud. In 2016, Kim Spivey founded Ground Printmaking, an independent printmaking studio that specializes in safer methods in etching. At Ground Printmaking, Spivey works with artists to assist them in developing prints and also dedicates time to her own studio practice. Her current work draws inspiration from the range of subtleties, intricacies, and fluidities found within the materials she works with. Spivey investigates the complexities found within nets, plant life, and the negative spaces around them while exploring the flux that can be found in the intricate nature of mark making. Welcome, Kim. We look forward to hearing about your practice.
Thank you so much for having me today. So yes, I have a PowerPoint to just go over the studio, working with artists, and also my work as well. So I'll go ahead and get started with that. So I founded Ground Printmaking in 2016. Um, and a big part of that was in 2016, right before I founded it, I went to ZMA's Printmaking to relearn etching because my background, how I learned printmaking, I used a lot of solvents. I was around nitric acid, tar-based materials, and just, a lot of hazards I didn't feel comfortable being around in the long run. So I wanted to create a more sustainable practice where I felt comfortable with the materials. So I went to ZMA's where I got a certificate in green intaglio and just relearned all the techniques in etching, but with safer materials and safer methods. Um, so that was really important for me to then feel confident in opening up my studio. So this is a peek inside, and you can see the etching press. That's where all the prints are made. Um, Here's another view. So the press, behind the press is a table where I do all the inking up, and there's a bathroom. That's where I keep my ferric chloride that actually does the etching. And so when I went to school, I used nitric acid. And with that, you have to be really careful because as nitric acid etches, it produces a dangerous gas. So you have to have an appropriate ventilation system for it. With ferric chloride that I'm using, I don't have to do that. It's not an acid, it's a mordant, which is like a metallic, a salt solution, and it corrodes the metal, but without that dangerous gas. And then outside too, I have a little setup where I have a counter. So I like to do any sanding or spraying outside so they're not building up inside, any fumes. When I started Ground, I participated in a lot of fairs and marketplaces to get the word out about workshops I was putting on, to share my work, and also to educate. So a lot of times I would have demonstrations at these events where I would walk participants through the whole etching process. So they would see the grounded plate. Many times they would get to work into the grounded plate, see the plate being etched in ferric chloride, cleaned up, inked up, and printed. And I find that by doing a demonstration like this, it really clicks and you get a good understanding of what etching is. So I'm not going to be doing a demonstration today, but I do have a lot of visuals, and I'll just go over the basics for anyone who is new to etching. So etching is a chemical process where an acid or a mordant corrodes a piece of metal. Etching is an intaglio printmaking process. So that means you're printing the recessed areas of a plate rather than the raised portions, which would be, like a stamp, and that's a relief process. And that's why you need an etching press. Since you're printing the recessed areas, you need a lot of pressure to force the paper down into the grooves to pick up that ink. And so etching is not scratching or carving into a plate. Scratching into a plate would be called dry point. And when you carve into a plate, that's engraving. And both of those techniques have been around for a very long time, and they have different characteristics in their marks, but they're not etching. So I have a couple visuals to walk you through the process. So the first thing when you're etching, I etch on copper with ferric chloride. So there's my plate. You have to prepare it. So it's important that all the edges have a bevel put on them. And so up top, I have a file that I use. Also, the yellow tool is called a deburr tool, and that will cut away that hard edge. And the reason why that's important is because the etching press, it has two rollers, and it rolls over the plate. So you want like a nice ramp for it to roll up onto. You don't want to shift the plate. And also, if it's a sharp edge, it could potentially cut the paper and the blankets. So first step, bevel, then smooth out the surface of the plate with steel wool or bronze wool. And after you do that, you have to degrease the plate. It has to be extremely clean, no grease, because the next step involves putting a ground on the plate. And so a ground is any substance that's going to protect it while it's in the etching solution. So in my case, ferric chloride, I need something to protect the plate, except for where I want to actually etch. So in this picture here, this is a setup I have for a soy wax soft ground that I learned about at ZMA's. It's two parts. It's actual soy wax flakes that I guess people make candles with, and litho ink. So melted together. And then there's a paintbrush in the can there. I dab a few drops on the plate and then roll out a smooth coating with this roller, a brayer right here. And so soft ground, hence the name, is very soft. So if you were to push your finger into the ground, it would come off. So it's great for textures. Here the plate is, it's been rolled out with the soy wax soft ground. And so once you have your ground on, then you can start removing your ground wherever you want your image to be. Keeping in mind also that it's going to be the mirror image on the print. So if you're doing any writing, that would have to be done backwards. So you can see on the left-hand side, I have my plate that I worked into, and I could just use a pencil to draw into it. It was so soft, it came right off. I also used a metal scribe to just get a finer line also. And then on the right-hand side, what you see is the actual print. Another thing you'll notice with soy wax too, you'll get a little bit of noise. So the speckles that you see, that's just from the ground easily lifting off from, if I touched it. So let's see. In addition to the soy wax, which is a soft ground, there are hard grounds too. So a new hard ground is called Big, and that's the red plate that you see on the right-hand side. And so with Big, you put it in an oven to cure, and it's just a much safer formula. It doesn't have any of those nasty tar-based materials in it. And so if a hard ground, hence its name, it's hard. If you touch it with your finger or your hand, it's not going to come off. You need something sharp to scratch that ground away. And so with hard ground, you can get really nice, precise line work. The plate on the left has the soy wax soft ground. And so I was able to draw into that with various tools, even the back of a paintbrush to get a different type of line. This is my tank where I do the etching. And so with ferric chloride, having a vertical tank is really nice because as the etching is occurring, those copper particles will just sit on top if you have it in a flat bath. You need to have it sideways in a vertical tank. So as the metal etches, it can then drop down to the bottom of the tank instead of sitting on top and clogging up the process. So after the plate is etched, then you can clean off the ground and then ink it up. So I use a plastic card or squeegee to force the ink into all those recessed lines. And then you need to clean just the surface. So I use tarlatan, which is like a stiff cheesecloth. I put it in a pad and I buff the surface clean. Now, a historical process is to then use your palm as a final wipe to get any residue off of that surface. And that's something I'm not doing as much anymore. even though when I did it, I would put a barrier cream on, I prefer now to just do a paper wipe so I don't have to worry about long-term effects of any ink absorbing into my skin. So my practice continues to evolve, and I'm always looking for ways, to make it a little bit safer as well. And this is a picture of the plate that you saw me holding on the press bed after it's been rolled through the etching press, and then lifting the print up so you can see the print above the plate. So common hazards in the print studio can be found in solvents. A lot of traditional materials need solvents to clean up. I've been using just vegetable oil to clean up my oil-based etching inks, which works really well. I then use like a gentle spray cleaner or dish soap and water to get any oily residue off. Inks and pigments, there could be solvents in the inks, certain pigments, lead certainly have hazards, grounds as well. Be mindful of dust. I am when I sand my plates and steel wool them, I make sure to wear a mask or do it outside with a mask and then vacuum up because you don't want to breathe those particles in. Likewise for aerosols, just being really mindful, wearing a mask, doing it outside if you can, and then, knowing the acids or mordants that you're using and any precautions you need to take. So wearing that appropriate protective gear, swapping out solvents for safer alternatives when possible. For me, it worked out with the vegetable oil. I didn't need to use mineral spirits or acetone like I did back in school. Ensure that there's good ventilation. Really know your materials, and you can check the material safety data sheets on them. You can request those from the manufacturer, and that's going to tell you what's in your products and any precautions you need to take. And then I like to stay updated and see, what new materials are out there. I might swap out for anything that has more hazards in it. All right, so with etching, there are so many possibilities. So I'm going to go through a few of them because the beauty of etching and working with artists is, having this inventory of possibilities and then matching it, different techniques with artists, based on what makes sense with their work. So this is a soap ground, and hence the name, there's soap in the ground. And it's a very playful ground. You can go in, you can add water, you can then paint more on. It is a negative process. So everywhere where you don't paint it is going to etch. Everywhere that you do paint it, certainly in a thick manner, is not going to etch that much because what's happening is the plate's protected there and it's well protected if it's a thick layer. And so with the soap ground, since you can thin it down, you end up getting a variety of tones as the etching finally does break through the ground. Here's another example of soap ground. On the left-hand side is a picture of two plates that have soap ground on them. So you'll notice on the left plate, that has more soap ground on it. On the right plate, not as much. It's a thin layer. So when we look at the prints, which are on the right-hand side picture, you'll notice that the plate that really didn't have that thick of an application prints much darker because it etched more. The plate on the print on the left had the thicker application of the soap ground, so therefore not that much etching took place, and that's why it's a lighter print. So here's a picture of Carol working on a soap brown for one of her prints. And you can see just how painterly it is. And you can just really play with it until you're happy with the plate. Then we let it dry and then can etch it. Another etching technique, this is a coffee ground, which is comparable to a sugar lift. So a lift ground, very painterly, and also a positive process. So everywhere where you paint, that's what's going to etch. And so with the coffee ground, you're actually using a coffee solution to paint onto the copper. And the way that it works is once you roll the ground on, and so I use the big ground for this. So I roll the big ground on and I bake it. But since the coffee has oil in it, it's not going to adhere. And so after you bake it, you put it in hot water, and everywhere where you had painted that coffee, the ground lifts up, exposing the copper. So that way you have a positive painterly process for etching. Another one is hard ground. And so this is the big ground again. And again, hard ground, you can get a really nice, precise line. Or, you can do lots of hatching. You'll see Carol did a lot of hard ground. So when we come to hers, you'll see the potential that hard ground has with line work. This is one of Carol's plates here, a detail. And you can see, it works wonderful for line work and hatching. You can build up tones with a hard ground. One of my favorite things to do in the studio is experiment and see, what other possibilities there are. So I make a lot of test prints. These are two separate ones. So the left strip right here, that is using a hard ground, but two ways. One way is just scratching into it with a scribe. So the line work you see on the right, that's all scribe. Or putting a sheet of sandpaper down and then drawing on the back of the sandpaper with like a ballpoint pen gives you this really soft graphite-like line that you don't typically associate with hard ground etching. So that was really neat. And then on the right, I'm playing with hard ground and soft ground. So on the top of this test print, it's all hard ground. So you see the precise, clean line work. You see layered lines. There's some dappling, also drawing through the sandpaper again. So that soft graphite type line. And then the row right below it is all soft ground. So again, soft ground, you can push materials in and you can get a lot of textures with it. So I pushed a net in, different fabrics, saran wrap to explore, what textures I could get. And then below that, you see those clean lines again, so hard ground, followed by what looks like soft ground. You can put like newsprint on top and very carefully draw through the newsprint to get another graphite type looking line. So that's one of my favorite parts, is just experimenting and seeing what the possibilities are. And then in working with artists, experimenting with them to see what the best method is going to be for their print. So this is Michelle A.M. Miller, and here she's testing out a spit bite etching. So you see her print on the right-hand side. Spit bite is when you paint directly with your acid or mordant onto the copper instead of, submerging it in a bath. And you can add water, so you can get this watercolor type effect with spit bite. And so here she's adding another layer to build up that pink. Now, when it came to actually doing the addition, we explored a couple different ways of getting that pink, but Michelle went with doing a sheen collé. And so a sheen collé is when you are gluing and printing at the same time. And so she actually painted those pink ovals first on a very thin paper and then let them dry, cut them out, and we pre-glued them. So they had dried glue on them. So after she had inked up her etching plate, we put that pre-glued oval on top. Then we placed the damp white backing paper on top of that and ran everything through the press. So the pressure made everything print, and the moisture from that backing paper reactivated the glue. So it fused the two papers together. So that's a sheen collé. Another way of working with sheen collé, and you'll see this in Carol's prints at the show, is to ink up your plate, spray it with water, put your thin paper on top, spray it so it's nice and damp and draping over, paint your glue, then use a razor to cut it right along the plate edge so it's perfectly the right size. And then put it on the press bed, put your backing paper, and so you're printing and adhering at the same time. And so this is a picture showing working on one of Carol's prints from an earlier edition. And for these prints, they were multiple plate prints. So you can separate layers onto different plates and then print them all together on one print. So on this one, what you see in the foreground is the print with two layers on it. There's a soap ground layer that you see mostly in the middle. And then along the border is a hard ground layer. So those two plates have already been printed. Now I'm positioning the third plate, which is a hard ground. And the way that this works is you have your backing, your print paper large enough so it can be pinned under the drum of the etching press. So when you lift it up, the paper is not shifting. And then you just need to carefully place the plate, center it exactly so that it will line up with the other prints. And this is a process picture to just illustrate inking up the plate. So that central plate that I was just placing, before I placed it, I had to ink it up. So I squeegeed the ink everywhere. I buffed that surface clean and then put it on the press bed. And this is the final result with the 3 layers together. And so another benefit of separating the layers on different plates is that you can play with different colors. So in this case, the inks were, I think, graphite, maybe black with a little bit of silver, and then maybe another mix of black with maybe a little bit more silver. So those subtleties start to build up, which is quite nice. So I'm going to rewind and just show a little bit of my evolution with my artwork. So this is one of my pieces from my MFA show. I have my MFA in painting, and I've always, have had a love for drawing, painting. I've been drawn to plant life, life cycles. So that's a reoccurring theme in my work. And also building up layers as well. So you'll see once it progresses into my prints, it's the same vocabulary, different medium. With a close-up, I've always had a fascination with line and linear networks. So you see that on top of the purple leaf, I'm starting to, draw and make up this linear network. And that comes through in my prints as well. So for this print, this is a process in the making. And this is for my Blue Traces print that's in the show. The first thing I did was put a soap ground on And so on the right-hand side on the white paper, that's what you see is the print of just a soap brown. And I went ahead and built up layers on just one single plate. I didn't separate the layers out. And so what you see on the left with the red line work, I had put a soft ground on the plate with the big, so that's why it's red, and then put the newsprint on top and drew into it. After I did that, I went ahead and put another soft ground on, going back to the soy wax soft ground, which is even softer than the big soft ground. And with that, I used Q-tips to drag in and to get line work as well. So I layered all of that onto one plate, and this is the final result from all of that layering. And this is in the show as well. Before I started etching in my studio, before I went to ZMAs, but after I graduated, I participated in a show at Resource Depot. Resource Depot is in West Palm. It's a nonprofit. They collect materials from businesses and individuals and have, a wonderland of materials where artists and educators can go to get supplies. And so I had a show there. I went in and collected materials to make work from. I was instantly drawn to these produce nets. They had the linear network, these interesting organic shapes. So I started printing the nets, and I painted the background of the paper first and then printed the net on top. And that evolved into drawing lots of nets and coming up with my own nets. And so I have two plates here. The foreground plate, that's the soy wax soft ground, and then the red is the big with the hard ground on. And so I'm working into the plates with the soft ground. I'm able to use different tools to get different line qualities there. That evolved into painting the nets. So on the left, there's a painting with ink. On the right, I'm referencing that painting as I'm painting coffee ground or coffee onto my plate that I'll then roll the big ground on, bake it, and then once I soak it in hot water, everywhere where I painted the coffee lifts right off. So the copper is now exposed and can be etched. After I did that, I regrounded the plate and put a hard ground on because now I wanted to get some really fine lines. And that's what you see in the final print. You see the thick painterly lines from the coffee lift and then the precise line work from the hard ground. I did a chine collé. I hand painted the paper first to get that washy background. And then I did the same method I showed you of Carol's plate, where I sprayed the plate, the paper, draped it over, and cut with a razor around after I had painted the glue on. And so this is in the show as well. And then that evolved, and coming back to Resource Depot again, I participated in another show. So I went in and I found this metallic, I'm not sure what it is. Maybe it was like a tablecloth that I cut up into strips, and I wanted to start making nets. So fortunately, there are YouTube videos on how to make nets. And I watched a couple of those and then was able to make my own net out of the material I found at Resource Depot and then print it. And so this is a detail showing the printed net on the right, the actual net on the left, and I layered it up a little bit more. I'll show you the final piece in a second, where I made another print and then I cut out of the paper all of the negative spaces. So I essentially had a paper net as well. And so that's what you see here at the show on the right-hand side. And then on the left, I used more of those produce nets that I sewed together, inked up and printed. So the print is underneath. So I had the print with the nets, the actual nets, and then shadows of the nets on top as well from the lighting. So that's where I'm at now, my latest work. As I wrap up, I just wanted to offer additional resources. So ZMA's Printmaking is a good resource. They have a research tab that highlights and shares their research projects, as well as formulas for a lot of their materials, like their stop out, their aqua tint, the soy wax soft ground. Another good resource is nontoxicprint.com. They have a lot of the latest and safer materials, so I like to go through and just see what's new. Resource Depot in West Palm is great for if you want to reuse materials. And the Environmental Working Group is great for looking up for your cleaning products to see, what kind of hazards could be in them. All right. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed that. I'd be happy to answer any questions. Although I think, Carol, first we're going to talk, right?
Right. I thought we could chat for a little bit, simply because we had this exchange, and you even brought it up in your talk, and that was where you were saying that you got your MFA in painting. And that's how I first knew you, because I worked with you in painting. So I always thought of you as a painter, and I just thought it was great that you made the point that you could be a painter drawer and you can make prints. And this is something I really hadn't quite appreciated until I reached out to you for help, because I'm a painter drawer. I have no clue how to make a print.
Mm-hmm.
And then, just the amazing things that I learned from having that exchange with you, where we would take my vocabulary, but translate it to a new medium, and you had the expertise. So, to me, it was so incredible to have resources in the community that could expand my reach as an artist. I pointed out earlier that Tom Virgin is listening to this, and he as well does the same thing, focus more on relief, I think, on letterpress. And, to me, for an artist to have that opportunity just opened up my eyes. So I'd like to talk about, why did you open up your studio to other people, and why are you engaged in helping other people manifest their vision?
I think it's super exciting to work with artists. One, they're usually the best people, so having them in the studio is always a pleasure. And then it's exciting to see what ideas they bring to the studio. There's usually a lot of problem solving that needs to be done to bring, what they have in mind to fruition. So that's kind of exciting too. It really mixes things up for me, because they bring up things I would have never thought of, and then that's inspiring for me. It's just increasing my toolbox and vocabulary from working with them.
Yeah, I have to say, from my experience of working with you, Kim, that you are wonderfully suited to that exchange, because you're so thoughtful in how you listen to ideas. Everybody knows me as grossly opinionated, so I jump in on people all the time. Whereas you take in people's ideas and work with them, offering your expertise and your advice, and not being hesitant to offer that, but not putting yourself on top of who they are as an artist. So, I kind of offer to people who are listening in on this is finding the right people to work with as you are on this journey to make art. And, it can really make you blossom as an artist. I have to say, moving to print, I don't know how to make a print, just so you know this, people. Kim is the expert, and she manifests my vision. And you made me aware of so many things. You opened up my world, so can you talk a little bit about your studio practice and the kind of things that you offer to community artists? I know you've had classes, or people can come to your studio and then they pay to work with the press, and you give the technical assistance and you train them to print. Is that how? Okay.
Yes, and certainly pre-COVID, I would have small workshops in the studio, 3 people maybe, or also working individually with artists and, seeing what they have in mind. I've had artists come in and that already know how to print, and just need to use the facility. Um, uh, let's see. But mostly, I would say I've mostly worked one-on-one with artists to, if they have something in mind, if they want to make an addition, so we go through that process together. And sometimes I'm more hands-on where I'm actually helping them print the edition. Sometimes I'm less hands-on, maybe they get to a point where they feel comfortable and they print the edition. So it's very flexible. It's, usually on a one-on-one basis to see what they have in mind and what their needs are.
Well, I know when I came to work with you, and I was fortunate to do it through a grant through FAU. So shout out to FAU for giving me the money to support my exchange with Kim. Because first, let me say that artists deserve to be paid, and they should be paid for services that they offer. But in coming to you, you started out, I'd say, like so gently, like saying, Carol, why don't you try out this approach? And you gave me little test plates, and you were so supportive and encouraging. And I felt so uncomfortable at first. And this is to my students who are listening in, is discomfort is a good thing because it tells you that you're in territory you don't know the lay of the land, and you will learn something new. And that's what we're here as artists for. And so, you would take I think the first things I made were rather nasty, and you would just be like, oh yeah, look at what you've done. This is so interesting. And how can we make that move towards the project that finally resolved? So yeah, when I finally got into the drift of how to manifest certain effects in printmaking, many of them you described, and then I got the big idea. Wasn't it overwhelming to work with an artist when the artist keeps on having ideas? The truth comes out. I was a bit of a load. Yeah.
No, it was perfect. But, I learned how to pace myself, because that first project we did, was a whole suite of editions, not just one, So that was a great experience, and I learned a ton, and just feel really proud of the prints that came out of that exchange.
Yeah, because they were shown at the Boca Art Museum.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, you did an amazing job on them because for people listening, the craft of printing a print is significant because I would see you wipe the plates, and it really takes a lot of finesse because you have to wipe the plate consistently each time in order to get an edition. And each of my prints took 3 plates, and there were 7 prints in that suite. So that was a huge amount of work. And then they were turning out so nice. I'm like, oh, Kim, why don't you make the edition like of what, 10 or 12 or 14 or whatever, 14, I think. So beware of working with artists. But I'm hoping that this dialogue is encouraging to people who are listening to say, oh, I'm not a printmaker, but I'm a drawer painter. And so I have an affinity to printmaking that maybe should be explored, either through working with a community press like yours, or taking a class with Joseph Velasquez, who teaches printmaking at FAU. And now you also taught printmaking for us.
Not at FAU, I don't think.
Not okay.
Figure drawing.
Oh, you taught
And
figure drawing, and see, there's all this crossover,
Right.
and you figured out safer methods for the printmaking studio. Oh, you gave a workshop on
Yes,
that.
yes, I did. Yes.
That's right. Yeah. So so important as artists for us to consider our health,
Yeah.
what our materials and methods are. And I know that you were working with Michelle A.M. Miller on her work, and she had a big epiphany because she was working with pinks, and she is now she's grinding up oyster shell. Can you talk a little bit about safety of pigments?
Yeah, I mean, it's really eye-opening once you start looking into pigments. And I haven't looked in nearly as much as Michelle has, but we've had a lot of conversations in the studio. Before this talk, I did a little research too, and I was surprised even in certain black etching inks. I think they said it was carbon and lamp black. There can be impurities in the oil, the linseed oil, that have health hazards. But like lead, is in a lot of different colors. So I think for me, I'm going to revisit all of my pigments and do a little more research because there are some real hazards. And that's another reason why I'm not doing the palm wiping anymore, to protect myself further. I've amped up my ventilation too when I'm using inks. I have one ink that has petroleum distillates in it, which is like a mineral spirit. So I'm extra cautious when I use that I've got the ventilation. Because you know what? Over time, the stuff builds up. And if your dose is just, limited to one day, maybe it's not a big consequence. But if you're doing this, all the time, I think it's super important to be aware, you know, what's building up.
Yeah, that's certainly true on all the areas, painting, drawing, printmaking, sculpture, ceramics. And sometimes we don't think about it enough. So what I really appreciate about your press and what I think makes it quite distinctive is not only were you concerned with environment and personal health and safety, but you were concerned about you're putting in the waterways. And you took the current concern so much that you went and you did special training. Can you talk a little bit more about that training? You went up to New York, was it?
I went to Massachusetts
Oh,
to ZMAs.
mhm.
They're in Western Massachusetts, and they do a lot of research on how to make printmaking safer. And so I felt really comfortable going there. I spent about a month there to get my certificate in green intaglio, um, to learn from them, and to see what research they've done, what are safer cleaning methods for working with oil-based inks, what are these new grounds? Because I had no experience with the new grounds. I just knew the old, traditional, nasty grounds I knew I didn't want to be around anymore. So it was great to get that firsthand, just walk through to see, how do these work? What can you do with them? And um, it's inspired me to keep, just looking at my materials because, maybe there can be other swaps that can be made too, and just to keep improving and making it better and more sustainable.
Yeah, I think, everybody sets up a studio practice and needs to appreciate that materials and methods do change. Paints and pigments change. I'm always getting notices about things that are occurring, so different companies. I won't name them and give them advertising, but they're always changing what it is they're doing. And so it becomes really incumbent on us to make sure we know what the materials are that we're using and how we're using them. And I have to say, it's really sad right now for me that students are working oftentimes in their bedrooms or small rooms at home that don't have proper ventilation. And so to be an oil painter and not have good ventilation is hard. I mean, I had a student just referencing how they were cleaning their oil painting brushes and because they couldn't use turpentine or they couldn't use a solvent that was so volatile anymore. And all these kind of issues become so critical.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I'm so thankful that you bring that out in your studio practice. If there's other questions that people have, they can type. Everybody knows I talk too much. I'm always like so interested in what's going on, but people can type in their questions in chat. And I also noticed that Tom Virgin is still here. And if he wants to turn his mic on, he might want to chime in on a few things because he runs a studio as well. And people might want to reach out down to Miami and work with him. And maybe he could say a little bit about his studio practice. So can you join us, Tom?
I just think that everybody who has a chance to print uh, is coming out of a tradition that started like 30 or 40 years ago. Not originally, but there were major artists that never made prints. And people wanted to have work on paper that they could afford. So UAEA and Tyler and these other guys would get together with people like Helen Frankenthaler and other people. Motherwell made many prints and painted like crazy. But for him, the translation was very immediate. He could do the same thing on plates that he did other places. Most of what I do as relief, but I also work on presses that only have a form that's this big. But I've made big prints. Everybody chooses the world that they live in art.
Mhm.
But, when you have a press, Kim could tell you that that press is hers, but everybody who uses it adds to the voice of that press. And so the knowledge of the press, the knowledge of printing, the aesthetics, the ability to put these works into other people's hands is so powerful because everyone can't go and buy a big painting. I would love to live with your work, but having traded so many times with so many artists over the years, I would have to get one this big, and I might be able to afford one of those because you make whole planets of worlds that are outside of this world. And, that's so important. And Kim, you do the same thing. Your work is beautiful. Printers trade. The nice thing about printing is you can keep one, you can sell one, and you can give one away. As a visual artist, the ability to have stock of something that you can use that maybe isn't going to buy you a new house or fix your car, but if you have a lot of them, it could be the part that pays for the paint that you bought last month. So
Right,
it's
because
another leg on the
printmaking is
table.
so community oriented, it's so collaborative. I love when doing, I'm a painter, so I'm so like isolated. I keep to myself. The minute I started working with Kim, I was like, I had no idea you all existed in the way that you exist. To me, that's what the show is about, to say we have these local resources, these presses that work with community and do this brilliant work. And I've known of your work for a long time. I had no idea that you got your BFA in painting, is the reverse of Kim, and your MFA in printmaking. I'm like, I had no idea, from FAU. How could that be? Because you're in Miami. I guess I always thought you were a Miami.
Well, I got my master's degree in Miami,
Oh, okay. But
but
yeah,
I painted when I was in Miami too. So, and I think that, I live in Miami. I throw out bad Creole. I throw out bad Spanish. I have 2 Cuban women that married into my family. I have grandchildren that are half Cuban, and they're teaching me Spanish in a way that only someone who loves you can teach you. 25 years of students from all around the Caribbean have enlightened my ability to communicate with everybody.
Mhm.
And printing is the same way. It's a shared language, and it allows people who don't necessarily communicate the same way to make a very visceral, tangible, articulate way of talking.
Right. Well, I'm so glad that you weighed in because I think we're going to end on the note of a question that somebody had to Kim, as well as me saying to people who are listening that reach out to local presses and see what they offer and open up community to you. Don't work in isolation the rest of your life. There's a wealth of ideas being generated out there in community, and the printmakers are at the center of it. So big appreciation to printmakers. And the question, Kim, for you is from Jen O'Brien. Kim, do you have any plans to open up your studio again for workshops?
I do, and I hope, in not too long. I'm just kind of waiting to see, with COVID, once things get better there, absolutely. I would love to have small workshops again. Yes.
Great. Well, I'm sort of glad that Kim isn't doing that right now because she's working on some work for me.
Yes, I need
So
to
I'm
get
so
through this
selfish.
too.
I'm monopolizing you. But on that note, big appreciation to University Galleries for hosting these exhibitions, for Kim Spivey for coming today and really opening up her eyes to possibilities in printmaking and making drawers and painters who are listening understand that they too can make prints. I hope that people will investigate those ideas, maybe shout down or shoot down to Miami, work with Tom Version. But there is so much available in this community. It's unbelievable. So thank you, Kim.
Thank you.
Thank you, audience. Wonderful that you were here. And thanks, University Galleries and Rodfolds. Final shout out. Awesome. Yay, people.
Okay.
FAU. Bye.